Hi, my name is Liz Harrison. I work for MU Extension as a nutrition and health education specialist. I work in Boone County and serve both Boone and Howard counties here in mid-Missouri. I'm happy to be with you all here to talk about the nutritional benefits of tomatoes as part of the virtual field day for the Horticulture and Agroforestry Research Center. I have worked for MU Extension for coming up on 2 years now, and I provide community-based programs for individuals related to nutrition, to physical activity, overall wellness, related to chronic disease prevention, and food safety. So that comes into the realm of food preservation. Some of you may be in the midst of trying to get your final crops that have all come in within the last few weeks put up and canned or frozen or dehydrated here for the fall and winter seasons. So let's first talk a little bit about what's in a tomato. So tomatoes have a variety of nutritional benefits, specifically in terms of the vitamins that they contain, as well as in terms of a compound that's called lycopene, which is a carotenoid, and that's kind of like an antioxidant, which usually we hear about antioxidants when we hear about things like blueberries. So the vitamins that are contained within tomatoes in large quantities are vitamin C, vitamin A, and then potassium, which you may hear vitamin K. So a medium whole raw tomato, so think about 2 to 3.5 inches, probably about the size of the tomato here on the screen, has 292 milligrams of potassium, which is about 6 to 7% of your daily value. It has almost 17 milligrams of vitamin C, and that is closer to 20 or potentially even a little bit more % of your daily value of recommended vitamin C. For vitamin A, it's again about 6 or 7%, and that is 51.7 micrograms of vitamin A. And then lycopene, this antioxidant again, is over 3,100 micrograms. So that ends up being your average US daily intake for that is between 6.6 to 10.5 for men and 5.7 to just under 10.5 for women. So one tomato could provide almost half of your daily recommended intake of lycopene. So why are tomatoes good for us? When we talk about vitamin C, the single tomato could provide almost 40% of our daily recommended value of vitamin C. Vitamin A really works to support our immunity, our vision, and our skin health. Vitamin K is one that we hear about when we think about what's good for our bones. So tomatoes are good for strong bones. Potassium is also a key nutrient for heart function, the muscle contractions, which our heart is a muscle, and then maintaining a healthy blood pressure and the fluid balance. So it really kind of helps to prevent that heart disease. Vitamin C is what's good for our skin, again. So it protects the skin, the nutrients that are contained within a tomato help protect the skin against damage and make our skin less sensitive to UV damage, which is the damage that could come from the sun. Strong bones, so again, that one was vitamin K, also the calcium and then the lycopene that's contained in tomatoes is good for strengthening and repairing our bones. It also helps to improve our bone mass or our bone density. The protection against cancer, that's again coming from that lycopene. So it helps prevent several different types of cancer. And the antioxidants that are contained in tomatoes can also help reduce cell damage, which again protects us against cancer. Regulating blood sugar So tomatoes contain a nutrient called chromium, which helps our blood sugar stay in balance. And then that in turn helps us to reduce our risk of diabetes, or if we're someone who has diabetes, that helps us to keep our blood sugar balanced so that we don't have too many highs or too many lows with that. In terms of our vision, that's where we go to vitamin A. So the vitamin A can help improve our vision. It can help prevent night blindness, and it may help reduce the risk of macular degeneration. So there's a lot of studies that are currently going on to see for all of these vitamins and nutrients that we put into our body, what are the short-term and the long-term impacts that come from those. In terms of prevention of kidney stones and gallstones, so there are some studies that have shown that eating tomatoes can actually lessen the risk of developing those in the first place. And then heart disease, again, we talked about the potassium. There's also some vitamin B. It's not in high quantities, but there's vitamin B in tomatoes. And those help lower our blood pressure. They lower our cholesterol levels. And that in turn helps us to prevent strokes, heart attacks, and any other heart-related problems that might happen. So back up here to this one about protecting against cancer. So the lycopene specifically has, there has been research that has been done to show that lycopene can help reduce the risk for prostate, digestive, and pancreatic cancers. And when you're thinking what other food products might have lycopene, tomato products are actually the #1 food product that we consume here in the United States. So tomato products in the US are responsible for more than 80% of our lycopene in our diet. All right, so some pretty good health benefits here from tomatoes. And there is a question that people often ask about which one is healthier, raw tomatoes or cooked tomatoes. So with a raw tomato, you might think of that sliced onto a hamburger. You may think of diced tomatoes that are maybe on a salad. Some people like to just slice up a tomato and eat that by itself, or maybe put a little bit of salt on it. So that's kind of what we talk about when we talk about raw tomatoes. When we're talking about cooked tomatoes, it could be something like this picture here on the right side, where maybe you have a pasta dish and you've tossed in some raw tomatoes, either cherry or grape, something smaller in size, or maybe you've even diced up a larger tomato. And those kind of cook as you make that sauce, or as you make that topping for your pasta. Other types of cooked tomatoes would be included in pasta sauces, ketchup. Think about, a good bowl of chili that might have some diced or some stewed tomatoes within. So in the US, we typically think about the fact that we probably eat most of our tomatoes in a cooked format. So when we eat our tomatoes raw, we actually have a higher amount of vitamin C that's contained in that raw tomato. So again, the vitamin C was about, it could be up to 40% of our daily value, depending on how much of a raw tomato we consume. And then when we cook those tomatoes, when we process them, even at a time of just 2 minutes, that increases our lycopene. So it does decrease the amount of vitamin C, but it increases that lycopene, which has, again, some of those protective factors for our health. So if we're limiting ourselves to only eating fresh tomatoes, then we're only getting about 4% of the that antioxidant of lycopene, according to some research that they have actually published in the International Journal of Food Sciences and Nutrition. So when you look at a tomato, you see that there is this thick cellular wall, including that peel, right? And that makes it difficult for our body to absorb the lycopene that's contained within. So once they're cooked, and again, even if just for 2 minutes, that breaks down that cellular wall enough that we're able to actually absorb the lycopene into our body. So the trade-off there is that when you're cooking your food product, it decreases up to 10% the amount of vitamin C that's contained within. So cooking a tomato is not going to remove all of the vitamin C from it. It is going to decrease it some. And so this is where we talk about having a good balance, right? So you want to have some tomato products that are cooked. So again, in your chilies, your casseroles, maybe you're making soups, a sauce for a pasta, using it with, ketchups or other types of, pizza sauce, tomato sauce. Those are all going to be cooked tomatoes. But it's also important to eat some that are still raw. So again, either a sliced tomato, having it diced on top of a salad, putting a slice of tomato on a hamburger or on a chicken burger. And so really just trying to have that balance of making sure that you're having both types of tomatoes because they do provide different types of benefits. And there is an assistant professor of food science at Cornell, Dr. Liu, who said, the research demonstrates that the heat processing enhanced the nutritional value of tomatoes by increasing that lycopene content. And you can also think of lycopene as a phytochemical that makes our tomatoes red. So when you see tomatoes, most of them are red, although we're starting to see with heirlooms a lot of different colors. And that can be absorbed by the body as well as the total antioxidant activity. The research dispels the popular notion that processed fruits and vegetables have lower nutritional value than fresh produce. And I would say that that is something that we come across fairly regularly when we're talking with individuals about cooking and about nutrition. The question of, is a fruit or a vegetable in its raw format healthier than a fruit or a vegetable that has been processed, whether that means it's been cooked or if it's been preserved in some fashion, whether that's through water bath canning or pressure canning, or if it's been dehydrated or if it's been frozen. So you think about, you go in the grocery store and you can pick up a raw tomato. You can also go down the canned foods aisle and you can pick up a can of tomatoes in different formats, whole stewed. You may find them halved or quartered. You may find them diced or crushed. So there's lots of different types of canned tomatoes. And then you may also be able to find them in your freezer aisle. So a lot of people will actually freeze tomatoes at home on their own. But the question then comes, which one is healthier, the raw tomato, the canned tomato, or the frozen tomato? And so the answer there is that you really just have to look and see what the nutritional content is of those. So in its raw format, it is most likely not going to have any sugars, fats, or salts added to it. If it's in a frozen format, you may find that it has fats that are added to it. So sometimes that'll be in the form of like a butter sauce with our vegetables. And then in a canned format, you may find that they add sugar or that there's salt that is added. And so that's where you have to kind of balance out the nutritional piece of things. All right, so how do we pick the perfect tomato, right? And if you are here at the end of, or coming up on the end of tomato season with the rest of us, you have probably perfected this. So we are looking for tomatoes that are soft to the touch, heavy in terms of weight, and you want them to have a firm and intact skin. So if there are some cracks or splits, that's okay, but anything that splits the surface of that tomato then has the potential for greater risk of bacteria being introduced. Your smell is actually your best indicator of ripeness. And then heirloom varieties, which I talked a little bit about, sometimes have the best flavor, right? So these are tomatoes that the seeds have been passed on, and there are a variety of types. You actually can grow tomatoes that the only color they will ever be is green. You have red tomatoes, orange tomatoes, yellow tomatoes. There are purple tomatoes. There are tomatoes that look like they're black on the vine, and those can ripen to have some red as a portion of that. So you'll get a lot of good flavor with that heirloom variety. Another thing that you may be wondering about is, how do you store tomatoes, and then how do you use them? So tomatoes are actually, raw tomatoes are designed to go in the refrigerator. You should be storing them at room temperature, out of sunlight, and in a single layer. So if they're stacked on top of each other or smushed really close together, that could speed up that decaying process. Once they are red and slightly soft, you can keep them for a day or two at room temperature. And if you're wanting to keep them for longer than a day or two, then you could refrigerate them. There are some varieties, I'll say this, there are some varieties of tomatoes that the packaging will tell you to refrigerate them. And so if the packaging does say that, then go ahead and follow those directions. And then tomatoes can be, as we've talked about, they can be raw, they can be cooked. You can stuff tomatoes, you can saute them, you can roast them, dry them, pickle them, fry them. They are a very versatile and easy to preserve fruit or vegetable, whichever side of the aisle you're on there. So when we're talking about things like sauteing or roasting or frying, right? So those are going to bring out different flavor profiles within the tomato. So typically a roasted tomato or most roasted vegetables will actually bring out a sweeter flavor than if you were to saute them or if you were to boil them. So I do want to touch just for a little bit on this idea of preserving tomatoes. So when we're freezing tomatoes, if you are going to go through the process of freezing a tomato, you will blanch it first, and then you will freeze it. So blanching is the process where you put it into boiling water and cook it for a certain period of time, and then that immediately goes into ice water, which stops that cooking process. So typically tomatoes that we are planning to put in the freezer, we're either going to put those in whole, we're going to put those in pieces, whether those are halved or quartered. We're going to make a sauce and then freeze that sauce in either a glass jar or a freezer safe container. You can also do them in, once the sauce has cooled down, you can put it in a plastic bag and lay that flat so that you have more space in your freezer. And you can do paste frozen. So typically when you freeze your tomatoes, if you're using that as a method of food preservation, you are going to want to use those tomatoes only in cooking. So that will be where you might pull pieces of tomato that have been frozen out of the freezer. That's what's going to go into your chilies. That's what's going to go into your stews, your soups, your casseroles. This is not something that is going to fit nicely on a bruschetta, right? So that last slide had a picture of the bruschetta, which is a piece of bread, and then it has some topping on it. The flavor content is not going to be there, and they're going to be very watery and liquidy once they defrost. So the next type of method is water bath or steam canning. So steam canning is a similar process to water bath canning. You actually follow very similar steps. The difference is depending on how long you have to process your product for. So this is a newer technology that has come onto the food preservation scene. So this type of method, this water bath canning, boiling water canning, steam canning, whatever you might have known this as, this would be where you do your tomato juices, your crushed tomatoes. You can do your whole or half tomatoes, packed either in water, in the tomato juice, or you can pack them with no liquid. This would be where if you're making a tomato ketchup or a tomato sauce. A lot of people who are making salsas at this time of year, you're pulling those tomatoes and peppers out of the garden together. Maybe you've still got some onions that are coming up. So those salsas that you are making, that's where you would use a water bath canner. Barbecue sauces will use water bath canning. And if it's a tomato vegetable blend, then you can use the water bath canning. So we'll talk a little bit about the difference then for water bath canning and pressure canning. So pressure canning would again be with tomato juices. So it's going to depend on your tested recipe that you are using, whether it recommends doing pressure canning or water bath canning. Again, you'll see your crushed tomatoes, your whole or half tomatoes packed in water, juice, the tomato juice, or with no liquid. Your tomato sauces, your tomato vegetable blend. So you're seeing that those are very similar to the ones that were also on water bath canning. So this is again where we go back and say, use your trusted recipe, use something that has been tested either by the University of Georgia with the National Center for Home Food Preservation, something that has come through a university extension office, or something that has come from a national trusted and recognized agency or organization such as Ball Canning. So you'll follow the steps there. They'll tell you whether or not to pressure can and for how long. That does vary based on your altitude. Here in Missouri, we're lucky that most of the state is under 1,000 feet, and so we all pretty much can at the same altitude. So not a lot of adjustments there. Or if you'll use your water bath canner. So the difference is if you would make a spaghetti sauce, so a plain tomato sauce, but if you were to make a spaghetti sauce that has meat, or maybe it doesn't have meat in it, then you would use pressure canning only, especially if it has meat contained within it. There's also a pretty good recipe out there for a Mexican tomato sauce, and that is one that you would use pressure canning for as well. So if you are looking for food preservation tips or tricks, you can contact your local extension office and ask to speak with a nutrition and health education specialist. We have a lot of resources that we're willing to share with you, direction to kind of point you in. And you can either stop by the extension office or you can call and make an appointment. And we can also test your pressure canner gauges. You want to do that about once a year. So that's just your friendly reminder to get that done if you have not done so. The winter is a great time to do that before you're getting ready to start on the next season. So I have my contact information here. So again, I'm at the Boone County Extension Office in Columbia. My email address is eharrison@missouri.edu. And the phone number here is 573-445-9792. If you have any other questions about food preservation, about canning tomato products, if you have questions about the nutritional benefits of tomatoes, or anything that I talked about here today, or even anything else related to nutrition and wellness, I am happy to discuss that with you. So feel free to give me a call or send me an email. We have our references here. And thank you to the Center for Agroforestry, to the staff and faculty at the Horticulture and Agroforestry Research Center in New Franklin for partnering with MU Extension and for inviting us to be a part of the field day today. We hope that you all have had had a great time so far listening to presentations, and that you'll get some more good information out of the ones still to come. Thank you very much.